You're listening to Pathways and Means, a podcast that inspires and shows people how to tap into their creative spirit. We sit down with leaders and makers in every industry to talk about their process, what inspires them, and about how to build incredible things with the power of creativity. The future belongs to the creators, so come join us. This is Pathways and Means. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Pathways and Means. I'm one of our hosts, Connor England, and today we've got a very, very special guest. Now, before we introduce him, here at the podcast, we're all about all things helping people really gain creative confidence and competence. And sometimes it can be really hard when you're first working with an idea or a project to really understand, does this idea have merit? Is it going to be something that's going to be able to go the distance? And, whatever situation it is that you're coming from, sometimes there are people out there that can be really inspiring because you can take a look at what it is that they're done and you can see essentially virtually anything it is that you're looking to put forth can be possible if you approach it the right way. This man who's coming on board, he not only has built one of the largest and most successful finance and marketing companies in the world, but has also been able to take that success and move it into different areas to support his community, support other areas that have been a huge need. He's an inspiration to all of us here, and actually has a fair amount of history with some of the team. So without further ado, it is our pleasure to introduce Cody Foster, one of the co-founders of Advisors Excel and AIM Strategies.
Good to be here, man. I was thinking though, with the history, we had you employed for a little while, didn't keep you, so it's the downside.
It was rough.
Your hair was shorter back then. Yeah.
Yep, had the regulation cut and everything.
That's right. Yeah.
Funny enough, ran into Team Schrader here a couple of days ago, so it was really good to reconnect.
That's cool.
So,
thanks for having me too.
It's a pleasure. So we got a couple of things that we would love to discuss and maybe take a little different angle. I know that you get a lot of people that see the success that you've had,
sure,
and they want to talk about that. Everybody's seen AE and AIM Strategies' expansive and widespread success, but not everybody has a chance to really get to know the origin, right? Sometimes we see status and forget that these are people that have stories and histories. And interestingly enough, at Advisors Excel, you've got a piece of that history literally hanging on the wall, right?
Yep.
You've got the kitchen table that you and your co-founders, Derek and David, sat around as this idea for Advisors Excel was percolating, and the rest is history. But bring us back around that kitchen table. Tell us a little bit about what it was like when you first got started.
Yeah, well, and I think even to your point, there's probably a lot of great stories even around that, right? Oftentimes we see the finished product or the production. We don't see all the work that goes in to get it at that point in time. And a lot of times when most of the foundation groundwork's being laid, people don't know who you are and don't see that work being done. So I have a good friend who always says, the lights that people shine under, just magnify the work that's been done in the dark. And I think that's a big part of it. So yeah, we started, Dave and I had left the company we had worked with about a year before Derek, and we were going to go be financial advisors, and realized pretty quickly that we didn't know what we were doing. We knew kind of the product stuff, but just didn't know anything about running the business side of it. And so kind of had this idea for Advisors Excel. And so when Derek joined, he kind of left. This would have been the end of 2004. Our lease was up. Dave and I just signed this little 1-year lease on a small little office, two little office buildings, or two little office spaces, I guess you'd say. So for the first probably 60 days, as we were looking for a new office, because we had a third person now and it wasn't going to work in those two little spaces, we literally sat around my kitchen table. So the whole kind of plan for Advisors Excel, we talk about these 4 core principles we were going to build the organization around. That was literally mapped out, sitting around my kitchen table for the first probably 60 days. And then we always say February 1st is our, official date of starting. But that was really when we signed our first lease and moved into, a little bigger office space that the three of us could. Derek and I shared an office, and Dave had his own little office in this space that we moved into. So it was... I kind of forgot about that kitchen table, candidly. You're moving on, you're doing stuff. And we had Mitch Holthus, who's the voice for the Chiefs. He had came in, this is probably 10 years ago now, and spoke to our team. And he knew our story a little bit, and he's like, man, where's that office, or where's that kitchen table at? He's like, you need that hanging up in the office here. So long story short, I'd actually sold it to some family friends. I had to go convince them to sell it back to me, and we chopped the legs off and we hang it up on the wall now, just to tell that origin story, right? Because now people forget. I don't know, we're probably at 750 employees now. We've, a long way from that kitchen table and origin. So reminding them and telling that origin story as much as we possibly can is important.
It's real important.
Yeah.
Always good to remember where it is that you came from, right? No matter how far forward it is that you go. And I think even looking at your commitment to Topeka, right, our hometown, speaks interestingly into that, because after you reach a certain level of success, right, really the world is your oyster. If you, especially with the model and the strategy that Advisors Excel has, the cash balance that it has, like, you could be anywhere in the world. So I think there are a lot of people that are curious, why did you choose to stay in Topeka after you had made it? Why was that important to you?
I'll try and answer that in a few ways, I guess. One, because I live here, right? I mean, that's probably the most basic way I've probably answered that. In fact, I think we're definitely not the first. There's been a lot of other great companies that have invested in this community, but there's also been a lot of companies where the leadership of those companies didn't live in this community, lived outside of it and didn't do a lot to invest in the community. And I think, all of us kind of being in this Topeka community want our city to be the best it can be. We know there's some things that we've got to get better at. So I think for us from early on, I think as we started to have more success, the idea of how can we leverage that to invest back into our community was always important to us. So the idea of leaving, I shouldn't say it, the question annoys me. That's probably a bad way to say it, but I've gotten that question probably 20 times over the years. Like, why'd you guys stay in Topeka? It kind of annoys me in the sense of, like, why would we ever plant the seed to anyone that they should leave Topeka, right? There's to me, Topeka's been our competitive advantage. You get great people who are honest, who work hard, who show up, who are reliable. So much of what we do is based on creating a great experience with the advisors that we support. So, you get people who are really good at that, just really good building relationships. So Topeka's been great for us. And then I think as we've had success, we've looked at it the exact opposite way. Instead of taking that success and using it to move somewhere else, why wouldn't we invest that back in to make Topeka a better community? And so still a long ways to go, but if you look at the progress, and we've played a small part in that, but I mean, I think if you look at the progress we've had in Topeka in the last 5-10 years, it's pretty phenomenal, man. I was just talking to a buddy about that the other day, and I said, man, you should compile all the lists that Topeka's made it on in the last few years, right? We were just named the best place for remote workers in the Midwest, top 3 hottest real estate markets in the country. Just, if I would have sat here 5 years ago and told you all that we were going to be talking about Topeka, like, nobody would have believed, that we'd be talking about it that way. So I think the more we can get, man, it still frustrates me when I see CEOs of other big companies here in town that live in Lawrence or live in Kansas City. Everyone's got the freedom to do what they want, but I just think we're going to take an approach where this is the community that's kind of raised us, and we're going to do our best to invest back in it.
100%. And whether it's Advisors Excel, it's Ames, it's even just your personal work, like we see just that level of investment and commitment to the community, and I think there's almost a universal appreciation for it. I think one of the things when I was at Advisors that surprised me most about that commitment was the volunteer component. So at Advisors, there's is it a quarterly requirement that there is volunteerism that happens by every full-time employee?
Yeah.
I see that, and I think that it's been so huge for the city being able to pour into that. There's probably a lot of different business owners, though, that might not be able to wrap their heads around how they incorporate that into their own business models, what the value would be, because you got an employee that's not on the clock doing productive work, that's an hour lost. What is it that you see that others might not, and what would you say to those that are thinking about starting a program like that?
Yeah, it's interesting to talk about right now. It's actually National Volunteer Week this week. So I just noticed when I walked into work today, we had a bunch of stuff up there talking about it. So we kind of stumbled into it, if I'm being completely candid. We do we call it our AE Big Day. Every year at the beginning of the year, we'll kick off the year, shut the office down. We talk about, how we do last year, what are our goals for this year, usually do some sort of personal development, bring in a speaker or something during that. And years ago, it's probably 4 or 5 years ago now, had the idea like we should break everyone up into teams and send them out into the community to do work in the community that afternoon. And so this is a long way to get around to your question, I guess. Man, people came back, and then we got together after that and had kind of a cocktail happy hour or whatever at the end of the day. People came back just on fire. Man, they just they loved being out with other team members serving in the community. And I remember I went actually to the Boys and Girls Club, and we cleaned out their basement there and painted and did all this stuff with probably 15, 20 other people. And it was just this camaraderie and relationship that you built from it. We kind of like after the event, we were talking about just how excited everyone was. And we're like, maybe we got to try and like keep that momentum going, right? And so, yeah, what we do is once a quarter, people go out. Like the expectation is every quarter you'll go out and do some sort of community project, spend some man hours or spend some hours like trying to help one of our community organizations that we partner with, and you're going out with other people from AE. So, and it is expensive. So, I think last year we donated or invested, let's say it that way, almost 6,000 hours of employees going out and serving during work, right? So it's not like you're doing it after work or on the weekend, during work hours in our community. But what I would tell you is our organization has started to grow. Trying to protect the culture is one of the things that we're always talking about. So now you get this opportunity to go serve in the community with 15 or 20 people. Most of the time you don't even know who they are, right? They're in a different department. You've maybe never met them before. So it's just created this opportunity for our culture and people to continue to connect. So it's a cool benefit from that. But then the other thing I tell people all the time, in fact, to answer your question more directly, I would say we've benefited more than it's cost us from doing this investment. And the second reason is, we're a service-based organization. So I say all the time, the number one thing we have to do to distinguish ourselves is create a great experience, great service for the advisors that we support. And so when you are out doing this in the community, I mean, you can be having a bad day. And when you go, I've used this example a lot, when you go pack like backpack snack packs for kids that aren't going to have anything to eat that weekend unless like you go pack and deliver these, it just changes your perspective. So I think people come to work with just a gratitude that's different. And I think it plays out in how we treat the advisors that we work with. And then the final benefit, so not only, the culture and community and bringing people together that get to meet each other, kind of this gratitude that people work with after it. But I would say the final one is from a hiring standpoint, man, it has been our secret weapon. So, people will go out and do their volunteer stuff, and they're typically posting something to social media. They're like SJ when he's downtown, eating out. It's just like constant post of all the stuff they're doing. But they'll post stuff there, and then you'll see all these people like and comment. We do what that has done to help us attract people that have a servant heart or kind of a servant-minded approach to life is just phenomenal. So I think even in recruiting people, up until this past year, Dave and I did every final interview. So nobody got hired without us sitting down with them before they did. Kind of got backlogged a little with our travel schedule and the amount of people we're trying to hire. So we've stopped doing it this year. But every person, one of the questions I always ask them is, why do you want to come work here? And I'll bet you 9 out of 10, maybe 9.5 out of 10 would say, man, I see all the work that you guys are doing in the community, and I want to be part of an organization like that. So it's just, for us, especially in this market where people are trying to attract talent, it's been a secret weapon in our attraction of great talent too. So, quite a few benefits to us on top of, hopefully it's having a huge impact on the community also, because a lot of these organizations need people to come volunteer as much as they need financial support.
100%.
So I know that's a long answer, but it's something that I've seen and I'm passionate about because it's been a huge opportunity and advantage for us.
I think it's a great answer. And in no small part because it sort of takes it out of the altruism question, like we're going to take a loss in order to give back to the community, and to really even be able to reframe different aspects. Like it absolutely does serve and it helps invest, but maybe some of those hidden benefits to people that maybe they're not expecting or identifying, that if they were to just step into that sort of culture of service, that could potentially see a lot of benefits.
It's a little why I say we stumbled upon it, right? Like, I mean, it really started out more altruistic, like this go out, serve in the community, and then we started seeing these benefits from it. And so now I would tell you, obviously we want to support our community and do all those great things, and that's still probably the driving force behind it. But I think we see all the benefits as a business decision of like, it would be a bad business decision for us to stop doing it now. So
that's really powerful.
Yeah.
So that's one element of how you control and help influence the culture at Advisors Excel in a really positive way. Now, you were featured in Darren Hardy's book, The Entrepreneurial Rollercoaster, which, I always say, judge a book by its cover, but not the front one, right? You go ahead and you churn that over. And on this book, you've got people like Donald Trump, Tony Robbins, Maria Shriver, Damon John. I mean,
this was pre-President Donald Trump. Let's clarify that, too. Right. This is when people still liked him.
We'll strip the politics away. Right. But just an absolute A-list of business influencers around the world. And like, oddly enough, one of my favorite sections in this book is the one on culture, where you get a feature, and you were on this, was it a cruise? You were on an experience around a bunch of people, and you struck up a conversation with somebody about what it takes to build culture. And before too long, all of a sudden, you had a nice little crowd built up. And in the book, you mentioned that culture isn't just putting up ping pong tables in a room and hoping that that's going to move people forward. What is it specifically about culture that you think that AE has done right? How do you view culture and approach it, and what can others learn from that?
So I think, maybe first and foremost, what we've done right is we've tried to build a culture that's probably true to who we are versus trying to pretend to be something that's not kind of natural to who we are. And I think I don't remember if it's in this book, I've had this conversation before, I remember the place I worked before we started AE, they would do the things at the time that were trendy in the culture. So, right, back then, like Zappos was all the rage for their culture, and that's what you read about. Like, you could dress like crap, play ping pong, do whatever you wanted. And so we would do those things, but then ultimately, I don't think anyone felt like that the people really cared about them. Like, yeah, we did the cool things that you were supposed to, but I think at the heart of culture, if your people don't feel like you actually care about them and it's being done for the right reason to invest in them, I don't know that it lasts or sustains, right? So I think, we've tried to do things to make AE a place where people love coming to work, but maybe in a little different way. I would say that I would hope that if you asked anyone that works at AE, the most important thing about working there, it's that they would say that they feel like we care about them as a person and have their best interest first and foremost. Overall, the benefits and the fun stuff and that. Now, a lot of those things go into how you care for the people. So I think we're just constantly thinking about what can we do to make this a place, and I don't want to oversimplify culture, but a place where people actually enjoy coming to work. This may oversimplify it a little, but my thought has always been, if people, especially with what we do, and you kind of understand it a little bit more, if people enjoy coming to work, they're probably going to do a better job of creating a great experience for our advisors or our clients, right? So why wouldn't we try and create an environment where people come to work and enjoy coming to work so they do a better job serving our advisors? So that's probably at the heart of it a little bit. I mean, I think we try and do fun stuff, but we're probably not like some places do fun stuff. We don't have ping pong tables. We still dress up a little bit. It's probably not as we probably don't dress as nice as we used to. I mean, it's probably gotten a little more casual, but I think at the heart of it is trying to create an atmosphere where people can come and do good work, not feel micromanaged, but also prioritize other things in their life, right? And I don't know if you remember this it's been a long time since you've been there, but I say all the time, like, we want your best from 8 to 5, but we want other people to get your best after that, right? So we want you to come here, be able to do great work, but once you leave here, be able to shut that off and go prioritize other things in your life too. So it's a constant battle too. That'd be the other thing, culture changes as we've hired. I think that's one of the things I probably spend more time on that today than anything else. It's just how do we maintain and keep and protect and grow and develop that culture as the organization gets bigger too. So the community service, benefits, some of those things play a huge role in it.
No, that's massive. And I think some behaviors can be articulated a little bit more directly. So like the quarterly service requirement for volunteerism,
Yep.
Making it a requirement, that becomes a behavior that maybe someone hasn't done before, but then, after they get into the culture, they get used to that set of behaviors. It becomes something that even if they were to leave, that now becomes like an integral part of how it is that they move in the world. And I think that sometimes companies being able to cast vision, get people out of their comfort zone, so someone gets hired at Advisors Excel or AIM Strategies, and this wasn't something that they did, but through that leadership and through that direction, it ends up becoming a pillar of how they move.
I'll give you an example, a few just in the last few weeks. We have a team member she's been fighting cancer a little bit, and other team members start volunteering to drive her to her treatments, so taking time off to drive her up and back. And had another team member that's been in the hospital, had some weird things going on with her head, and her kind of leader, manager of her team has been going up to the hospital in Kansas City checking on her and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I mean at we've said all along, we want to create this connected community where people feel cared about, where we're watching out for each other, probably above all else. And so to see the people grab and take that and run with it too has been a really cool thing. And one of the other things we talk about in culture all the time is this idea of just constantly growing and getting better, right? So we're always talking about growth as an organization, but at the foundation of that is our people just growing and getting better. And so to see the people taking that and running with it has been a lot of fun too. And that also means, I think we've developed a lot of people that have left AE and gone on to do other great things. And some people are like, man, do you get worried about that? And I'm like, if you're going to have a growth mindset, I'd be naive to think all those people are going to be at AE their entire life, right? If we're going to push them to grow and develop, and at some point they're going to take a risk and go start their own business, do something else too. So that's a big part of the culture, I think, also. Yeah. And getting comfortable with that, right? That, if you have a growth mindset, you're probably going to lose people that outgrow the organization, and that's okay. It creates opportunities for new people to step into those roles.
It's one of my favorite quotes from Richard Branson, right? Train people well enough that they can leave, treat them well enough so that they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even on the growth mindset piece, I think that sometimes people don't know what they don't know. They're used to work cultures, and this is just the way that it's been. And so there can be a little bit of culture shock when they come into a place that moves differently. And I imagine even around the leadership table, sometimes that requires you guys to experiment and explore with things that you haven't done to see if it's going to be a good element for the culture. Now, there's one in particular that I wonder, because corporate incentives are a really interesting beast, right? How they influence productivity and behaviors. So my area of study was behavioral econ, and one of the areas that we covered was labor economics. There's a lot of thought when you do it right that goes into incentive design. And I think the most common places we see that are sales commission structures.
Yep.
So if you wanted to have a tournament inside a department and you posted the leaderboard, you've got someone up here and that's very public, and then so on and down the line. And one of the interesting things is that can lead to some unintended consequences, right? Where you've got sabotage happening on certain accounts. But sometimes you can design an incentive tournament so well that it causes the entire organization to lift up. And there's one that AE does in particular that is has a fair amount of notoriety around town. You take
probably know what you're asking about even before you say it.
So, Yep. So if AE hits its targets for production, you take all of your full-time employees plus one to Mexico.
Yeah, usually Mexico.
Okay. Yeah. Got a little bit of variety.
We went to the Bahamas once too. I think our last one was Bahamas maybe. So
that's incredible.
Yeah.
Now, when you did that, how did that come about? And interestingly enough, like it seems like it's been mostly positive, but were there any maybe unexpected consequences of making that a goal that happened as a result?
So, the size of the trip is maybe one of the unintended consequences of it. It was kind of, again, I mean, you said it well. I think a lot of times you experiment with a lot of different stuff, not unlike the community engagement, community service stuff we did. We stumbled into that a little. We'd had an idea, man, this is probably going back now 12-ish years ago, maybe longer than that, because I feel like we had about 30 full-time employees at the time, right? So the company's pretty small. And we set this, we thought we were going to have a really good year. So it was probably like 08, 09, somewhere in there. So we set this goal of like, it would be cool. We had to take everyone to we went to Cancun that first year, LeBlanc. I still remember the resort. I remember everything about it actually. And so we set this big goal that was going to be like a big stretch for us to hit. But we were growing, at a really rapid rate, and just built a lot of excitement around it and ended up crushing it. We just blew through it, took everyone. People loved it. It was one of those things, again, like people still talk about that first trip to this day and some of the fun that we had on it. So did it again the next year, and then we did it again the next year. And then it became, we survey our team quarterly, but we do a big one every year where they're giving us feedback. It's still the number one ranked, I guess if you'd call it perk or benefit that we do every year. It's like the number one thing people talk about. So we've just kept doing it because it's really worked. And, over the years we've talked about because it's a big expense now, last time, we didn't go last year because we missed our kind of stretch. COVID, travel was weird anyway, but I think the last time we went, which was to the Bahamas in 2020, so right before COVID hit actually, I think we chartered 7 planes out of Forbes Field to get everyone down there because it became we couldn't even get everyone down there in time, with the flights. And so when you take, I think 1,200 people to a place, it's a lot of work and it's a big expense. So there has been a lot of talk around should we keep doing this or could we invest that into something else? But I think just generally we keep coming back around to it's the one thing people talk about all the time that they love. Going back to culture, it's a great way to get people out of work, spending time together in a destination, just a great way to reward people. I'm always surprised by how many people, I probably take it for granted these days, but how many people have to go get a passport because they've never been out of the country before, So for a lot of our team, it's the coolest trip they've ever been on up to that point in their life. So we keep doing it, man. We talk about it, but people love it, so we keep doing it. And again, one of those things we stumbled into a little bit, and I don't know that there's a better way we could invest that to have a bigger impact than that's become. So
yeah, I can see that. I have seen some groups that try out different incentives, and either they end up really, really working, or they create the exact opposite effect where all of a sudden games start getting played or corners start getting cut. And so I wonder, what would you recommend for someone that's starting to look for an incentive?
Well, I think you even asked about the unintended consequences, and I didn't really answer. I don't know if there's a ton of them, but there's been a few years. Last year was an example. We were close. So let's say within 0.5% of hitting our goal. So we actually had some conversations around, man, how are people going to be upset that we're this close and we didn't do it? But ultimately, Dave and I said, goal's a goal, man. You don't hit it. You don't celebrate almost wins, right? You celebrate wins. And so we said, what was actually kind of cool is people are like, I'm glad we didn't go. They're like, I think it would have sent the wrong message had you guys decided to go through with this, which was kind of cool to see that people don't take it for granted. That's one of the things you start to worry about a little bit, right? Is that it becomes an expectation that if you don't hit it, do people get frustrated? And so that was kind of good to see that they didn't. Sometimes people have done stupid stuff on that trip and they've been let go. So that's maybe one of the unintended consequences. We've lost a few employees over the years because they decided to do really dumb stuff on that trip. And Derek, our old partner, used to always say before we go, he's like, there's nothing you can do to advance your career on this trip, but you can sure end it, so be smart about what you do. And some don't always listen to that. So, but overall, I would say the benefits of it far outweighed, any negatives to it. I think to your question about designing, perks. It's what you said. I think you want to make sure that you get the intended consequence out of them. We actually just made a big change. We did away with so the only people, like anyone who's in a sales role is kind of on a variable compensation. And then the rest of our team had this bonus based on us hitting kind of our goals each quarter, and that we actually did away with it last year and put it all into guaranteed compensation for them. So just raise salaries. We raised salaries, and then we took our bonus and put it into salary also. And a little of that is we were growing, we were questioning, is this really getting us the benefit? Like, are people showing up and working harder because they get this extra 2.5% per quarter if we hit our goal? And I think what we kind of found is they weren't, right? It wasn't influencing if they showed up and worked any harder on a given day. It was just this kind of legacy program we'd had for a long time. And it was Reed Hastings, his book. I was reading about what Netflix does, and he said, we're just going to pay people well and tell them we're going to trust them to do their job. Like, we're not going to incentivize them. We're just going to pay them top of market. So, we raised about salaries across the board about 20%, which was a big financial decision, but I think the right one, just because it wasn't getting the intended consequence that we wanted out of it. And so I told people, we're going to treat you like an adult and trust you to show them to do your job well and pay you well to do it. So I think just making sure that you know what you're trying to accomplish, and then tracking that. If it works, keep doing it. If it doesn't work, adjust it. The only other advice I give is maybe you're trying stuff out, make them shorter term, so don't roll out like a year-long program and wait till the end of a year to see if it works. Roll out a 30-day program, especially in sales is probably where we still do it the most, right? Just to incentivize that activity. So short-term, incentives to see how it works, and then you can kind of build off of that.
Yeah, I could see that, especially if you plop down a year-long goal and you commit, and then who knows where that ends up going.
Yeah.
It can be hard to course correct.
Yep.
So I've got one more question for us. I want to be respectful of your time, and I think this has been a wonderful conversation that certainly opened our eyes on a couple of things, and hopefully there are some people out there that can see that. Now, a lot of it was around more corporate culture specifically, inside of an organization. Broadening that up to a little bit more of the community and what's possible in terms of what you can create for the people around you. You did something really cool here for a while, some years back. Tell the world, what was it, and what inspired you to do it for those years that you did?
Well, and just even this entire conversation, the first question you asked me, and then as we were talking about Topeka, and one of the things I'd be remiss not to say is, I think Tony Robbins said this, and it's always stuck with me. He said, we often overestimate what we can accomplish in a year, but we underestimate what we can accomplish in a decade. And I think so many people, you asked about people see the success at AE today, but they didn't see the 10 years where nobody would have predicted the success that we have today. But that's when all the hard work was being done to build that. And I see and talk to so many people in the community that are working on so many projects right now that they get frustrated and they want this success to happen overnight. And I think, man, it shouldn't happen overnight, right? Like, you want to go through some of those challenges and some of those struggles and some of those battles to build like character, build a strong foundation. Because if the foundation isn't strong, man, once the success comes, it won't last. So I think that's something we've always been, in everything I've tried to do is like, how do we build the right foundation first, right? So if it does have success, that we're built on a solid foundation and it can last and sustain. And so even that, tell the world was kind of the first, I guess for myself, where I started looking around the community, talking about how I can bring some people together, but also do some things in our community that would have positive outcomes into the future. And, so many of the relationships, SJ and I, that's kind of where we first connected and met. I mean, I can trace back now, I'll bet half a dozen close friendships still to this day that kind of started out of that. So it was back, I think, 2014. It's been a while ago now as I think back, but it was shortly after the stuff had happened over in Missouri, where the kid got shot by the police, and there was a lot of rioting and protesting in Ferguson. So I think that was around that time frame. And I just reached out to a couple of the people I know and said, like, man, that could happen here, right? That was the conversation. We were all sitting around just kind of talking about that, and how would Topeka respond if something like that happened? And so I think I had this idea. I'm like, what if we put on a free concert and we just try and get a bunch of different people to come together and bring people out to this concert and just, make it a cool night, build some community, build some relationships. So we did. It was I would say one of the most diverse groups that's ever gotten together in Topeka history. So I still have this picture that's awesome. That's like this 70-year-old white couple sitting in the front row, beside like a couple of young black kids that are jumping up and down, celebrating and having a good time. So, we put on this concert at the Expo Center, or Stormont Vale Event Center now. Brought in Lecrae, who I didn't really know, just connected with because like him and respect him a lot. Had a couple people don't even remember this, but Tyler Lockett, who's starring for the Seahawks now, spoke at that event that night. A buddy of mine, Phil Davis, who's a MMA fighter, he's in Bellator, he's the light heavyweight champ right now, just won the belt back, came and spoke at that. So just tried to bring a bunch of people together that night, and turned into, we did it a few times, but it's I feel like it spurred a lot of, I shouldn't say this event alone, but a lot of the collaborations that I've seen that have gone on in the city since then. Like, a lot of people met through that, thing of bringing people together and all of us working on it together. So hopefully we'll have some more things like that happen. But it does speak a little bit to, Topeka's we've had our fair share of situations we've had to navigate over the last few years, and relatively speaking, I feel like we've done a pretty dang good job as a community of navigating some of those different things. And so it's what I love about what's going on in this community right now. It's not just it's not like just the business community's doing well. I really feel like if you look around, there's a lot of progress being made in a lot of different areas in the community. So a lot of that just comes down to relationships and spending some time with people. So that was probably the best thing to come out of that. So
it's a big deal, and I see a lot of those relationships that were formed at that point, even some of the conversations and them seeing what was possible as a result of the event, continuing to bleed over into the community. So,
I think the other thing that I just want to continue to do is, this is one of the things that I think Topeka struggled with for a long time. It's also just raise the expectations of what's possible here, right? So to put on and bring in Lecrae, and we've brought him in a couple times now. The next year we actually did it in front of the Capitol and shut down the street, and to see people coming from all over, it's what excites me about what's happening right now in Topeka, right? Is people are like reimagining what is possible and what's happening there. And I think you all probably saw, but even like our buddy Michael Dupatan's featured in Forbes magazine. To see him like written up in Forbes talking about Topeka and just some of the things that have happened lately, it's really cool. And I think that was a big part of that night too, is just trying to do something really well with some excellence and raise the expectation. And we're seeing that happen all around Topeka right now. I think just a lot of things are being done really, really well. Got a bright future for sure. So,
well, Cody, I think it's fair to say that you have been a big part in raising the expectation of what's possible for a lot of people here, not just in Topeka, but in the greater communities and those that follow you. So I appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Anytime, man.
Dropping some nuggets on us.
Yeah.
And for everybody who's watching, watch this one and watch it again. There's a lot of truth in there. Go ahead and learn a little bit more about Cody Foster and his story and his company, Advisors Excel. And as you're going throughout your own journey, remember there's some things that he talked about, not forgetting where it is that you came from, setting forth strong foundations, and doing everything you can to pour into the relationships around you. You might just be surprised how much it ends up building you and yours up too. Cody, thank you for being here.
Always, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening. We hope you found today's episode informative and inspiring. If you liked what you heard and you'd like to hear more, visit pathwaysmeans.com to check out a ton of additional content from the CPM team. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok, where we post daily content and engage with creators like you. Signing off for Pathways and Means, we'll see you next time.